Now I'm getting ready to cut my mortise on the hollow chisel mortiser. It's a 5/16. I just want to talk a second about laying out. Now if you look at this face, you can see there's only two lines on it, here and here, and they're off to one side. Whereas on this one, which is what a lot of folks do, is they run the lines all the way across. Well, that introduces confusion because the mortise either go here to here or here to here. So whenever you put a line on a board, you want to introduce clarity and not confusion. So this is a better way to do it. And notice that the lines don't go all the way out to the edge. If they did, I'd have to sand them off, and that might result in rounding down the corner. So be careful when you do your layout. To cut the mortise, start on the two ends. And then work your way across. The chisel will follow the path of least resistance, so it is best to establish the two outside ends to get a nice straight cut, as opposed to working from one way all the way over. So, there's our mortise. Now it's time to cut the tenon. I want to take a moment and talk about the strategy for cutting a tenon. Now, to do this, we're going to use probably a 50-tooth alternate tooth bevel blade. And that's very important because an alternate tooth bevel blade leaves a V cut. And we're going to take advantage of that V. So, when you're doing a tenon on a table saw, it's usually two cuts. The first is the shoulder cut. The second is the cheek cut. And if you pay strict attention to the depth of your cuts, you can eliminate a lot of handwork down the road. So, if my tenon is going to end up at 3/8 of an inch thick, I'm going to run my shoulder cuts just inside of that 3/8 of an inch border. So the V's, the score lines, are just coming in a tad past it. So the reason for that is when I go back for the cheek cut, I'll achieve my distance, but I'll just have two little scribes on each side that will have no impact on the joint structurally, but will eliminate a whole bunch of handwork if I had not paid attention. Now, as just described, I'm going to be tenoning this piece into this leg. So I'm going to start out with my shoulder cuts. And I'm going to have a test piece, a sample piece, which I'm going to designate with the red, as well as my real piece. So I have the blade about 1 1/8 away from the fence to the outside because my mortise is deeper than that. Alright, that has it nice, so I'm going to go ahead and cut the real piece. Having made my shoulder cuts, now I'm going to make the cheek cuts. And I've got the blade set to just under the height of the kerf. I don't want that blade making contact with that top part of the cut. It should come close to it without touching it. And I'm using my tenoning jig to make these cuts. Now obviously I'm going to start out with my test piece. And,
Give it a little micro adjustment. And that's actually pretty good. Now here's my good piece. And once again, I'm just a little too wide, and that's how I want it to be. Having made those cuts, I want to transfer the shoulder location from the mortise to the pieces so I know where to cut them. And I want to leave a little bit of room, a heavy 1/16 of an inch on each side of my pencil line for a little bit of movement. I'm going to go ahead and make these cuts on the bandsaw. From here, I have to pare down the little bit of stock that was left over from the bandsawing. And I want to come in from the end with a chisel narrower than my apron. Because if it was wider and I dipped it, I would end up getting a nick in the exposed face, and I definitely want to avoid that. I'm just taking, I think, a 3/8 chisel here and trimming down. I have it mounted in the vise this way as opposed to perpendicular, because this way when I'm pushing on it, I'm not worried about it rolling on me. If I had it sideways and I was pushing hard, I might worry about the piece rolling. And that could lead to a hazardous situation. So I'm just taking this down to where it goes. And with these flush now, I'm ready to try to fit it. For that, I'm going to use a shoulder plane. All right, at this point, the tenon is too wide. It won't fit in there. So I need to pare it down a little bit. For that, I'm going to use a rabbet plane, which just allows me to take little passes off of each side. And you want to make sure that you're taking it down evenly. It's very easy to rock this and end up making a tapered tenon, which you want to avoid. And you have to use a rabbet plane for this as opposed to a block plane where it simply won't go. All right, at this point I think we're probably pretty close. And I want to be able to work it in there without it splitting the leg. And that looks pretty good. We're flush on top, it's nice and tight, we're tight all the way around, and that's an example of a good mortise and tenon joint. Now, in the actual construction, I would take my plane and plane a little chamfer all the way around. That helps spread the glue and it travels in a little bit better. And there's my joint. Now, this is the rabbet plane that I was using. It was a rabbeting block plane. We also have smaller shoulder planes, what they're often called, that are available for use as well. So we should have an assortment of planes that will work for carrying out this task.